All right. Can everyone hear me? You guys can hear me? All right. So, welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. It is nice and rainy after NEAF on this lovely Saturday. Um, Chances are it's because everyone bought new astronomy gear and was hoping to try it out tonight. So, of course, it has to be raining. That being said, for our people online, do check us out on uacnj.org. That's where you're going to find a whole bunch of info on our organization, all our member clubs, our telescopes we have, as well as our upcoming and past talks, with addition to links to our YouTube and Twitch, because we do live stream these programs every Saturday that we have, and our old programs are on YouTube. So if you ever see a program that you wish you could have been here, you can always check us out there. That being said, we also have our socials. So our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our Discord channel. We do announce on our Facebook when our next talk is and what that talk and any special events that we might be having. We are, once again, a nonprofit organization, so everything you guys have done, including just liking and subscribing to our channel and our videos, has helped us out greatly. Now, tonight's talk is an excellent follow-up to last week's talk, where we talked about buying a telescope. Tonight's talk is actually, you bought a telescope, now what you do, with Paul Fischer. Paul has a bachelor's of engineering and chemical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology and has worked in the environmental and chemical industries. Though always interested in celestial objects, Paul's official start as an amateur astronomer was one night 7 years ago, lying in an awkward position on his roof in the freezing cold, holding a pair of binoculars. He caught a brief, clear glimpse of the Galilean moons of Jupiter, and from then he was hooked, as many of us are. After some introductory reading, he purchased his first telescope, and now he is an active member of Northwest Jersey Amateur Astronomers and volunteers and is currently president at United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey, which is us. And to this day, he still manages to frequently find himself outside at night in awkward positions in the freezing cold, seeing neat stuff in the sky. And with that, here's Paul.
Hello, everyone. And sounds like to me the mic is working, so we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to get rid of our welcome screen here, so bear with me a moment as I start up my presentation. Here we go. And here goes the presentation and slideshow from the beginning. Best place to start. And as Kim said, the title of my presentation today is You Bought a Telescope, Now What? As Kim also mentioned, this is a screen capture from our website. Daniel right here last week Daniel Kirby gave a presentation, so you want to buy a telescope. And if you can see right here, there's blue text right here. Probably can't read it, but you can see where it is. Click on that link and you can watch that presentation online. Great companion to the presentation I'm about to give you right now. So take a look at that, and thank you, Daniel. All right, and holy smokes, a war story already, you betcha. But Kim already gave the most of the meat of that war story. But here is kind of what I saw. This is someone who took a picture of Jupiter and the Galilean moons. This right here, of course, the big one is Jupiter. And you can see 1, 2, 3 dots over here and another dot over here. And those dots are the Galilean moons. And very easy to spot with a pair of binoculars if you can hold them steady. Just a tip on holding binoculars. The steadier you can make yourself, the easier it is to see objects with a pair of binoculars. You can get a tripod, of course, but if you want to try just holding them, hold them by the end, and then sit or even lie down and steady yourself. You can bring your elbows in a little bit, just to post a little bit if you know what posting is, and hold those binoculars nice and steady, and you'll be able to see the Galilean moons and Jupiter quite easily that way. All right, one thing that I want to expound upon after seeing Jupiter and the Galilean moons is that I had a shiver of realization. I was seeing things that sparked some of our most fundamental of physics from the smart people who found them in days of yore. And I was reliving, if not, obviously I don't think I could recreate their tremendous thinking, because this was all original thought at that point. But if I have seen any further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So a lot of the Newtonian physics that we have come to rely on in our physics, in our everyday lives, from a lot of our modern engineering things, but also just our understanding came from this guy here, Sir Isaac Newton, and Bernard of Chartres, I think that's pronounced, and that is, by looking up at the sky and watching the moons go around Jupiter and other interactions of other planets, our understanding of gravity and momentum and those types of things happened through those types of observations. So I was in my mind at least, walking through or better appreciating our modern understanding of physics. Of course, other names, Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, and many others, share or added to these discoveries and our understanding. And therefore, I'm sort of taking a walk through the history of science when I look up in the sky and see things astronomical. And it's a relatively cool thing to do. Not only is it just seeing cool things, but, you're touching history by doing it also. So why is you've got a telescope now pertinent? Well, we're going to go into that in my talk. What is the model and why is that relevant? We're going to talk a little bit about the geocentric and heliocentric models, and why amateur astronomy is really, really cool. So that's kind of the main thrust of why I'm doing this presentation right now. Let's go into the models a little bit drier, but it's important to understand. What are models? Models are simplified representations of an imagined reality that enable predictions to be developed and tested by experiment. So a lot of things in science, but one might even extend that to just our capability of humans on how we understand things, are based on models. Reality is so chaotic and so infinitesimal in how complicated it can get as you start to break it down, that we necessarily, in order to make decisions in the time frame that we need to make them by, don't necessarily use full understanding of reality in order to act on things in the real world. So humans are constantly using models. And this next point is kind of important. Science, philosophy, and religion, etc., universally agree that humans exclusively use models to understand reality. I put a big ha after that. that has been a topic, a philosophical topic since even probably before Aristotle and Plato. Okay, there is no universal agreement on whether we can actually understand reality in its application. It goes to maybe normative versus positive reality philosophies. So don't think that it's settled, but just be aware that it might not even be possible for humans to understand reality exactly. That it is at least ubiquitous, if not exclusively, that we understand the world by using models. And why is that important in astronomy? Because the first thing you learn is in astronomy is maybe this idea of this celestial sphere, which is a sphere above us as we stand on the planet. But here you see it surrounding the Earth, so we would be somewhere on the surface here, and above us is this larger sphere, and that's called the celestial sphere. Now, people who know science know that this is not how it happens, right? The sky is not projected on a sphere above us. We know that. The Earth revolves, orbits the sun, and it itself rotates, and it is on an angle to the sun. And that's the reality of the situation, is that the sun isn't a particularly important star in the galaxy or our universe, except that we live there. So that this Earth-centric idea is incorrect. The heliocentric idea is correct. However, I just talked about models. So this model here, this celestial sphere, where we pretend that the universe is projected on a sphere around us, helps us understand the motions of stuff in the sky as we look up. It appears to be that way to us, and it makes sense for us to do that. But realize again that that's a model, and that is not reality. So this is one example of models versus reality. Taking a look here, I would like you to see that the equator, the celestial equator, is here. It is a projection of our equator above us in the sky. The ecliptic plane, of course, is at a 22-degree angle to that, to the celestial equator, and you can think of the ecliptic plane as the equator for our solar system as opposed to our planet. Our planet is leaning in 22 degrees a little bit, so that's how that goes. And you can see the various equinox and why they're there, where they cross the two planes. And north and south pole, north and celestial pole, and south celestial pole are also pictured there. Just to get an idea, you want to maybe look up the celestial sphere and get an idea of how that works and what's involved in that model that we use to understand how planets and other things move in the sky. A warning before we go into further that amateur astronomy is a big field. Once you start with a telescope, you're going to see a lot of things that you feel that you have to understand before you can start, and I'm suggesting you don't do that. First of all, just get an idea. In order to see everything in the sky, you have to spend a year doing it anyway. So you're already limited to, even if you were to be diligent and see everything that you can every day, it's still going to take a year, because it takes that long for the Earth to go all the way around the sun. So you might as well relax a little bit and let it take a longer period of time. And sort of like those memory games, years ago, like Merlin and others. I think that was the name of the game, but where you have to memorize a position and color, and then the next one, and then the next one. Amateur astronomy is so big that maybe you should relax a little bit and take one bite at a time off of that elephant, and that way you learn a lot more. Learn at a more relaxed but reasonable pace on how to do things with your new telescope. All right, a basic understanding of equipment. Now, Daniel did a very good job last week of going through these, better than I have, but let's review very quickly. Right here is a Newtonian this is a refracting telescope. This is the simplest telescope, or the one that people most often, not necessarily the simplest, but the one that most people think of right away when they think telescope. It has an objective lens in the front and an eyepiece in the back. And the light path through that telescope is relatively simple. This first lens will have a tendency to focus at this point here, and then this eyepiece has a focal point that corresponds, and then you have an image that happens at that focal point, and that image in the case of a refractor is inverted, and then it goes to the eye. So I want you to notice here that you have some sort of focal point inside the telescope, and that you have an objective and an eyepiece. And you just keep that in mind. The objective and the eyepiece, two elements to that telescope, are important in order for you to get this image at the focal point. Both are necessary. This is the Newtonian, and the Newtonian here has a mirror instead of but it is curved, just like the lenses were curved on the previous, so it also has a focal point. The focal point, the image comes this direction, hits this diagonal mirror, and then goes out the side. That's a lot of times how you can tell that someone has a Newtonian. And so it sort of travels two-ish times through the tube and then out to your eye. And so this is a pretty simple thing, because this one's really just a tube and this objective. Of course, there's these two. There's the eyepiece here, and here is the diagonal. If you hear any wows in the background, we are currently experiencing a thunderstorm, and the lightning displays are quite impressive. Right here is a catadioptric, and that's the general terminology for this type of scope, but specifically this is a Schmidt-Cassegrain, and the objective is right here. You have a mirror that I believe not a mirror, a lens that up in front that sort of conditions the light a little bit, but you have an objective in the back, another curved mirror that it hits in front of the image, and then comes out through the focal point, and an eyepiece back here. Right here's the eyepiece in the back. So the advantage of this is that you can see the light travels 1, 2, 3, so you get a long focal length in a relatively compact package. So these are stubbier telescopes, but the light's passing through 3 times, so the length actually is something like 3 times the overall length of the telescope. All right, so question for the non-existent crowd in front of me right now, or people are watching at home. Please play along. What is a telescope's purpose? Everyone assumes that a telescope's main job is to make small objects that are far away bigger. Is that correct? No, it's not exactly correct. That is one of the functions of a telescope, but maybe not its main function. Maybe more important is this light gathering power. The light gathering power of a telescope is a function of its diameter, and it varies with the area, the cross-sectional area of the telescope. So if you remember, we take for a circle, which most telescopes have that cross-sectional area of a circle. The area of a circle is related to the square of its radius. And so what I've done here is taken the naked eye, taken the radius of the naked eye of an average person's naked eye, the the lens on the eye, the pupil, and then a 4-inch telescope and an 8-inch telescope. I set this as 1, so I divided 9 by 9 to get the naked eye as 1, and these two numbers as comparators. So this is the cross-sectional area ratio, so you can see, get an appreciation for how much additional light power these two telescopes have over the naked eye. That means that dimmer objects become brighter because it gathers that much more light from that distant object. So that's really important. Some of the nebulae and some of the planets and other things, we can see a lot more detail in those on those objects, by having this additional light gathering power. Stars become brighter. Stars remain pinpoints of light. We can, from our space telescopes and some of our really advanced ground-based telescopes and telescope arrays, resolve star disks, but that's few and far in between. You need a deep sky object or something that's a lot closer to us and actually to resolve the disk and make it bigger. So most stars, and especially in your amateur telescope, you're just going to see stars being brighter. They still remain a point. We talked about the telescope. Now let's talk about that other part at the end of the telescope that is required as part of the overall focus capabilities of the telescope, eyepieces. The up top here are a bunch of different types of eyepieces. Eyepieces themselves typically have multiple lenses and multiple coatings, and are even laminated together. They are actually like mini telescopes themselves. That is to decrease error or aberrations in the image that you see. Eyepieces themselves, a mid-range eyepiece can rival the purchase costs of a say beginner level telescope. So just so you're aware, eyepieces being that complicated and that interesting in its manufacture, they can rival the actual cost of the telescope. Eyepieces are, as I said, have multiple compound lenses with coatings to eliminate aberration. Their focal length is going to be right on the side of the eyepiece, and it usually expressed in millimeters. I haven't seen it expressed in something else, but I guess it could be. And that's important, and we'll get back to that later in the talk. There's two types or two sizes from a diameter or a cross-sectional area perspective: 1 1/4 inch and 2 inch. I talked about how much value goes into the eyepieces because they are complicated instruments, and there's a couple of other pieces that are sort of like eyepieces that sort of enhance your eyepieces capabilities. There's reticle, Barlow, and angle viewers that you can install in front of the eyepieces or as part of an eyepiece. The reticle can be. You have self-focusing or variable focusing eyepieces and things like that. Some of these I would recommend as you get used to your telescope a little bit and help your overall viewing pleasure. And some of the variable and things like that I would stay away from until you find an actual need for. My strong suggestion, and the same that Dan gave last week, is that you should learn your scope with your default eyepieces. You'll typically get 1 or 2 eyepieces and pull it out and start learning the scope. And I mean, you know, bunch of viewing sessions over months to actually get an idea of what you're doing with the default eyepieces. The telescope manufacturers know their scope, know what you're going to look at, or at least can give a good guess, and they provide you with the eyepieces that you need to get started. So don't go out and invest in a bunch of eyepieces. My suggestion is you start investing in these guys, but more maybe even sooner early these guys as you actually find a need. In other words, I want to look at the Veil Nebula, and I read that a broadband filter would help bring out the Veil Nebula. Well, that's when you might want to consider buying it, as buying another piece of equipment, as opposed to just going out and investing in a bunch of equipment immediately. All right, some eyepiece terminology. Exit pupil is the image height exiting the eyepiece. Eye relief is very important, especially for those of us who wear glasses. How close your eye needs to be in order to see through that eyepiece. Let's see if I kept my, no, I did, the apparent field of view and the true field of view. These two, this one is something that you can read right in the literature of your eyepiece. The manufacturer determined that, or designed the field of view that way in their eyepiece, and that's something that you read off of the manufacturer's specs. The true field of view is something that you will calculate, and I said that we'd be getting back to that one, and we will do that again a little bit later. Okay, another consideration when you are buying a telescope are mounts, and let's go over the 2 main types of mounts and then talk a little bit about computerization afterwards. The 2 main types are the altitude azimuth. For an example, a Dobsonian, you'll see those on Newtonian telescopes all the time. They're easy to set up and intuitive. They're artillery-like. It's like you're aiming downrange, except you're aiming up to something in the sky, and whatever you're aiming at just keeps going up there, and you catch it. It's telescope-centric. In other words, wherever the coordinate system that you use when you're thinking of it, how high do I have to be, how far east or west, is telescope-centric. It's centered on the telescope when you are using an alt-az mount. Equatorial telescopes. They're harder to set up and less intuitive to move. They're electromechanical tracking. In other words, we're going to talk about computers again. This is even before computers. These mounts, the benefit of these mounts is that mechanically or electromechanically, they will follow the rotation of the Earth, the rotation of the Earth. The sky it will track with the sky going across, the object in the sky going across from east to west every night, and it'll keep into account where you are on the planet and all that type of stuff. And when I say it will, if it's electromechanical, you have to set all that stuff up when you set up the mount. So like I said, it's sky-centric, and it has setting circles and rotational orientation to keep track of what's called right ascension and declination. And that's why we went through the models in the beginning of the talk. It actually follows that celestial sphere that we talked about, and that's what right ascension and declination is, coordinates on that sphere. So the equatorial is very good for things such as astrophotography and EAA. Not to say that you can't do it with computer equipment on any type of mount. It's a little bit better using the equatorial. Push to and go to with modern electronics, computers, and controllers for amateur astronomy makes your mount choice less critical, especially with the starting scope, especially if you're observing. It becomes, like I said, a little bit more critical with astrophotography and EAA. Maybe you want to choose an equatorial. And just a warning on computer systems. Let me make sure that I did not. No, okay. Just because your mount is a computerized doesn't mean that you don't have to know what's going on in the sky. You do have to set up your computer mount. You do have to calibrate it on stars, so you do have to know things that are going in the sky. And sometimes these computer mounts will not get the object exactly in the field of view, and you have to know enough about what you're doing to move it around to get it into view. So you want to still gain a good knowledge of what's happening up in the sky in order to use them as proficiently as you can. Still a good choice, the computer mounts, but don't think that it's a freebie. You got to work at it a little bit. Other accessories you might want to have: a red flashlight and a regular flashlight, a red dot finder, a fixed focus finder scope, a Telrad once you know what you're doing, really fast and easy. Fixed focus finder scope, that's what I began with. The red dot finders, a lot of scopes come with them. I'm less thrilled with the red dot finders, but you can start with them. A green laser pointer, that there's some methods of cheating, pointing your telescope at stuff using the green laser pointer. Plus, if you're with other people, you can point things out in the sky very easily with the green laser pointer. Make sure your laser pointer is legal. They can come in higher than legal powers. A broadband filter to put in front of your eyepiece, a case for your equipment to keep it nice and clean, and a nice bench or chair. There's various types of adjustable chairs that you can buy, or you can make at home, in a relatively cheap and doesn't require a lot of woodworking know-how to make them. The reason you'd want a good bench or chair, just so you're aware, is the steadier you are when you're looking through the telescope, the image in the telescope will appear that much steadier too. It's like when you're trying to look through binoculars and it's shaking really far, when you look very far, same type of thing happens with the telescope. The steadier you are, the steadier your image is in the telescope. All right, some vision tips for when you are out using your telescope. 30 to 45 minutes for full adjustment of your rod cells. You, of course, are in the dark and you're using your night vision, and you need to adjust to that. And so you want as dark an area as you can get, dark vision or dark adjusted vision as much as possible when you're looking through your telescope. Use averted vision. If you're looking at something in the night, and you might notice that if you're looking directly at it, you see it less well than if you look slightly away from it. The same thing happens in the telescope. So if you're looking for something in the sky through your telescope, and it's maybe a dim object like a nebula or something like that, you might not see it if you look directly at it through your telescope. So you might move your eye, not the telescope necessarily, but move your eye to look at elsewhere, slightly elsewhere in the eyepiece, and you might catch that object. It works in telescopes too. Same thing with motion. You can move your eye around the eyepiece a little bit to see whether or not you can find the object. You can also move the telescope a little bit in this case to see whether you can see the object. Dim objects will appear a little bit better if you use averted vision and motion. The other thing you want to keep in mind is surface brightness of an object. Not so important with telescopes because it's very hard to make the planets get so big that they get so dim, but certainly say some galaxies and smaller nebulae, etc. you can actually magnify it so that it becomes too dim, because what you're doing is you're spreading out the total brightness of that object. You're sort of smearing that light over a bigger and bigger area, so it becomes dimmer and dimmer and more difficult to see. So you want to just keep in mind that the surface brightness of deep sky objects. All right, learning the sky. Um, so it's not pie in the sky. In other words, it's not difficult. It's not impossible to learn the things that people up here know. One way to learn it is just losing the scope and going out and just looking up and understanding where the constellations are at different points of the night and at different times in the year. So you don't need the scope for that. You just go out and just start identifying constellations. Once you start identifying constellations, you start knowing the stars in those constellations. Well, then now you know various stars. You have those in your memory, and you can use those to calibrate your scopes, etc. So one way to practice using your scope is by not using your scope. Second is navigation aids, and we'll talk about what those are in a second. Another thing to realize is that you have a cheating brain. So if I come up here and I only set up my scope here, up here at Jenny Jump, UACNJ, and I'll start to learn, oh yeah, Mars is going to be over that tree. Well, I just cheated, because if I go to set up my telescope at, say, a park by my house, that tree isn't there anymore, and now I have to search around for where Mars is again, because I didn't learn where it is in the sky. So realize that you want to start identifying where things are by where other things are in the sky. That way you're not cheating and using land objects to remember things. That's not to say it's bad to say, oh yeah, it's going to be at that tree. Just realize you're doing that, and that you'll need to pin it also in the sky a little bit in order for you to truly understand where things are in the sky. For instance, the Hercules supercluster is on the west side of the trapezoid of Hercules. See, that is compared to the other stars in Hercules, not compared to the tree in front of me here in UACNJ. Sky parties and other events help tremendously with this type of stuff, because people will have telescopes trained at various other objects all throughout the sky. You'll learn about new objects, you'll learn about where they are, all that type of stuff. So come up to UACNJ, go to other astronomy clubs, other star parties, and see what they're doing, pick their brain a little bit. Big help. All right, first we're going to talk about a planisphere. And did my thing is it? Thank you very much for doing that, Kim. I didn't notice you doing it. All right, so I have some visual aids here. Do we actually have a? Do we actually have some public out there? Because if we do, I'm going to pick on you. All right. All right, so I'm going to I want you to take a look. This is you can see this is the same shape as a planisphere, but I made it. And I put some important numbers or letters that you can't see on that planisphere here. And I want you to tell me what you think is wrong with those, the arrangement of those letters. Well, can you see them, first of all? All right, all right, all right. Well, I have to stay in camera. If you could come up, just tell me what you think is wrong with those letters. They represent the directions, obviously. North, south seem okay. What about east and west? They look reversed, don't they? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Kim. So here's why, all right? So we're used to looking at north, south, east, and west like this. We're looking down at the earth. And we see north, let's do it to the real north. North this way. Sorry, people at home. North this way, south this way. But on this planisphere, it's reverse. If north is that way, then west is supposed to be that way. But the planisphere says it's east. Why is that? Well, because we don't use planispheres this way. We use planispheres this way. And if you can see here, if I go like this, and I put north this way, west right here is in the right direction. So you have to remember that we're looking up at the celestial sphere when we use it, not down at the earth like we would a normal map. And so any atlas, any planisphere, those type of things are oriented so that they are looking at the celestial sphere, not down at the earth. Thank you, Kim. Here's two star atlases. And I said navigation aids. One would say that a chart, like in when you're driving around on a boat, is how one would normally consider or would consider navigation aids. Well, we also use them in amateur astronomy. And here is the Cambridge Star Atlas. This is a very good field manual that you can take out, and if you want to find objects, you find out which page you are on when you're looking up in the sky, and you can use the Cambridge Star Atlas for to help find your way around or plan your evening for what you want to look at in the sky. This Millennium Star Atlas is 3 volumes and probably thousands of pages, maybe 3,000 pages. I don't know, something, I don't know what it is, but a lot of pages. This is a reference that I wouldn't consider a field manual. You'd want to maybe have that in your office or at your home, and you can look up detailed information on objects. Now, what's the difference? The difference here is that this object, which is like a thin book, like a regular atlas you would buy at a gas station, it only goes to stars that are 6th magnitude. That is brighter stars. The lower the number, the brighter the stars are. 11th magnitude, and you get this many stars instead of a little thin atlas. You get 3 large volumes at 11th magnitude. That's dimmer, and so the dimmer you go, it's exponential. How many more stars you see, and how many more are going to be in your atlas. So maybe the Cambridge Star Atlas might be one that you'd want to start with. All right, and I was going to, let's see, I wanted to hit field of vision. We'll just do this here because I think I wrote them down. Yeah, I wrote them down. So I'll just mention them. This right here is Sky Safari. It is my preferred computer atlas. This combines the convenience of say the dimmer magnitude star atlas, so a more comprehensive, larger atlas with many more stars in it, with the portability of that 6th magnitude. it has the advantage that you can zoom in and zoom out and see what things are actually going to look in the sky. Plus, you can turn these lines for the various constellations on and off. Here's very famously Orion and Orion's belt. So you can turn those lines on or off, and so it provides the convenience. But it does have a disadvantage that the other atlases don't do, is that you're only looking at this portion of the sky at one time. Whereas the atlas, you have the entire sky to reference at one time. So, this itself, I would say that you would need maybe a computer or phone atlas, and maybe one of the atlases, one of the print atlases, to really get a good planning capability, both robust and in the field. All right, let's talk a little bit that now that we sort of have an idea of the things that you might need to with your telescope in order to start looking at stuff in the sky, what are some of the things that you might look at? Well, this is how I would suggest. I'd go down this list a little bit. And the first thing that you might want to look at, which everyone, it's always interesting to look at because you can see so much detail on it, is the moon. Then the planets, the 5 usual suspects, the easy ones to find. The stars, the easy ones to find: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Deep sky objects, including globular clusters, open clusters, nebulae, and galaxies. Then the outer planets. The outer planets are a little tougher to find. That's Neptune and Uranus. I would say Pluto. You could look at it, but it's probably going to look like a star, a dim star in your telescope. Some of the bigger asteroids, and then finally some of the transient objects. That includes comets that happen to be close by at the time, and then specific views and events. Though, I'd warn you that sometimes things like meteor showers and other events, including eclipses, are sometimes better looked at naked eye than they are in a telescope. Transits and other things like that, you might want to hit with a telescope. Oops. All right, so we talked about these deep sky objects and the stars and the planets and asteroids. How do we figure out where they are and how to find them in the sky? The first thing you want to do is realize that there are catalogs, and then the maps and the atlases reference these numbers, these catalog numbers. So MWhat, NGC who? Well, here's these two more famous catalogs. There are many other catalogs too, but here are the two biggies. The Messier catalog, and the NGC catalog, the New General Catalog Index catalog. The first one, the Messier catalog, was compiled by Charles Messier, who was a comet hunter. Ironically, the Messier catalog is probably the most famous and well used of the astronomical object catalogs. Ironically, it was a list of objects to avoid looking at if you're a comet hunter. Not to avoid looking at them per se, but it was a list of things that are not comets. Therefore, comet hunters weren't as interested in those objects. Don't look at, that's not a comet, basically, is what he was writing down. So it was sort of, we backed into that one a little bit. Originally it had 103 objects, but it currently has 110 objects now. The NGIC catalog was originally compiled by John Lewis Dreyer, who built on the work of the Herschel family, who began cataloging the objects. The New General Catalog Index catalog is its full name, and it originally contained 7,840 objects, but it has been supplemented by two major updates, and those two major updates added 5,386 objects. So a lot of objects to look at in the sky. A lot of things that we look at with amateur astronomy has both a Messier number and a NGC IC number. It has since been revised a number of times, is now called officially the revised NGC IC catalog. All right, so we talked about a little bit about why we would want to see the moon. You can see maybe here some detail of the moon. Now this is my first telescope. My Newtonian is me holding a camera as steady as I could, my phone camera up to the eyepiece, and even with just that meager capability, I was able to catch quite a bit of detail. It's very easy through the naked eye to see this level of detail on the moon. So the moon remains a very interesting target for any session you have outside with your telescope. Always take a look at it, I think. Stars aren't just, I said, a point of light, well, and it gets brighter when you look at a telescope, so they're boring, right? Well, no, they're not necessarily boring, because you can notice things such as the difference in magnitude. Look at these stars in the background here versus this star right here, which is extremely bright. This extremely bright star happens to be Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky. And so notice the magnitude difference, quite interesting. Sirius happens to be close and has a native brightness to it, so it's both bright and close. Realize that some of these stars in the background, I don't know if any are, but maybe. They could be as bright as Sirius as if you're close to it. However, they're further away. So remember that the brightness that we see here on Earth is related to the square of the distance it is from us. And of course, stars have different inherent brightness to them. Also notice, you can see these two stars here. This is Albireo, and Albireo A and B. B's the dimmer blue one, and Albireo is the brighter yellow one. So that is in the constellation Cygnus. And if you look at these guys in the telescope, you will maybe for the first time appreciate when you hear maybe a little bit about stars and what they do and how scientists know what temperature they are and things like that. And you'll hear about different colors of stars. And when you look up in the sky, you only see white stars. Well, these guys, the color difference is obvious immediately in your amateur telescope. So you can tell that different stars have different colors. Here's an outer planet. This happens to be Neptune. You can tell a little bit by its color, but what I want you to notice here is that it's not one of these points of light over here, nor it's that brightness coming from that one star. We've resolved the disk. We made it bigger, and it's no longer a star, but it's still a circle, but it's a bigger. Seems a little out of focus in this particular picture, but so a little blobby, but it is a. You made it bigger, and if you made it bigger in your telescope, then it's probably a planet. All right, everyone's favorite subject, math. We'll go into a little bit. This is all the math you need to get started, I promise. So not that bad. We talked a little bit about true field of vision and the apparent field of vision, and and we're going to talk about magnification up here. So first you need to calculate the magnification of your telescope, and I said, if you remember, that in order to work a telescope you require two things. You need to know the focal length of your telescope, which will be in the literature of your telescope, But remember I said that the focal length of the eyepiece is printed right on the eyepiece? Well, here's where we use it. Knowing the focal length of the eyepiece and knowing the focal length of your telescope from your telescope's literature, you can now calculate the magnification. So you need the eyepiece and the telescope working together in order to get a magnification. And that's the equation right there. Focal length of the telescope divided by the focal length of the eyepiece. Now, to get your true field of vision, you take your apparent field of vision that you again get from the manufacturer of your eyepiece. It'll come with the literature in your eyepiece. Divide by the magnification you had just calculated, and you get your true field of vision. So that is how much in the angle in the sky you are looking at. And now you have all the math you need to create an eyepiece chart for your telescope, and that'll get you started. So that's the complicated math that you have to be in order to be an amateur astronomer. Could I borrow your light again, Kim? Here are some things you can do. Right here is maybe the angular size we're talking about, that field of vision angle that we're talking about when we're looking at, say, a nebula in the sky. That angle right there is, if we were to, our eyepiece were exactly that size theta, then would be exactly to see an object of theta size in the sky. And over here, you can play a trick here. So knowing the size of your field of vision, you can do some rough calculations on how big something is in the sky in angular terms. So if I know my field of vision is this big, theta big, this object seems to fit 4 times across the field of vision. So you can say approximately it's 1/4 the field of vision that you have in that eyepiece. And conversely, you can look up in charts how big the object is you want to see and predict the eyepiece you need with your telescope to see that object. So that's why that's useful. Thank you. All right, coordinate madness. Now, there's not going to be a test on this later. Thank you very much. And so don't worry about that. You don't have to memorize this at all, but it is a little, you're going to get a feeling maybe that it's a little confusing. And you're correct. It is confusing. You'll have to noodle about this one a little bit, but I just want to make you aware of it. All right, so coordinate system in madness, there's different coordinate systems you can use in the sky. One of them is all altitude and azimuth, and that might be more appropriate to your alt-az mounts. Azimuth is how far east of north something is in the sky and how far above the horizon. And that is, again, telescope-centric, where you are now compared to how far east of north you are and how far above the horizon you are currently. Right ascension and declination are tacked on to that celestial sphere that we are imagining in our model above our heads. Right ascension is how far east of Aquarius you are, and that is measured in hours of right ascension. And then declination, how far above the equator you are in degrees. So you're using hours of right ascension, 24 hours being a rotation of the, and it's like 23 and some odd. Just the difference between sidereal and normal time. And then just to make it all confusing, because we get down to what we call minutes of right ascension and seconds. And then angles are also broken down to minutes and seconds, and they're not equivalent. Right ascension minutes and seconds are not the same thing as circle hours and minutes. There's a conversion, 15 degrees per hour or 15 arc minutes per minute of right ascension. And don't memorize that. You got to noodle on it a little bit and see some charts, and you'll understand it. But I'm just pointing out the difference now, that there is a little bit of coordinate madness that you have to figure out in order to understand it fuller than you started with. One more technique I want to go over. Yeah, but I have a go-to, and we talked about this. Yeah, you're not going to be able to avoid star hopping completely because, like I said, you're going to have to calibrate your scope. Your scope is sometimes not going to point in exactly the right place that you want to point it to. Second of all, you'll learn the sky itself much better if you learn star hopping. And finally, I find that finding stuff in the sky is part of the challenge, and it's fun. I like doing it. I like knowing how to find things in the sky, and maybe you agree with me or you don't. But you know, consider the fact that it actually might be fun just trying to find things in the sky. Here's a great way to start star hopping and to understand the concept. This constellation is Lyra, and Lyra is right up here, and you can see, look at this, by the way, bigger stars on a star chart mean brighter stars. Vega, a very nice bright star, and this constellation is actually visible up here at Jenny Jump with the naked eye. Once you find Vega, you can find this this trapezoid here next to Vega, and on the far leg of the trapezoid is the Ring Nebula, a very cool object. But you can see the concept of star hopping because you find Vega very easily with the naked eye and in your telescope, and then you move your telescope from Vega to this star, and then halfway between these two stars, roughly halfway, you'll find the Ring Nebula. And that's all that star hopping is. I'm going to start here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, and then in between these two, I'll find the Ring Nebula. And you find it through maybe your guide scope, or excuse me, your finder scope, and the Ring Nebula is right there, and you've found your first object via star hopping. So that's all that star hopping is. However, not all of them are this easy. This is an easy one, but I would start there, how to figure out what star hopping is. I want to go through here. This is Bob the accountant. He is a imaginary constellation in the sky, one that I made up. You can see maybe here a bigger star right here. So maybe we would start here. Or here, this is a double star that would be indicated on our atlas. So maybe we'd start here, because I know that's a double star because I can see immediately there's two stars there instead of one. I would find it in my telescope, and then here, move up here, and then somewhere in this triangle, maybe closer to this star, I would end up finding M401K on Bob the accountant, which is a nebula. So that is one way to another way with a maybe more complicated path how you would star hop in order to find an object in the sky. Thanks again, Kim. All right, a few more things. We're almost done. Here's your homework. These are some of the suggested, or I suggest some of these books to read to help you to learn to do these things. I'm not just dropping this information on you and then leaving it to you to figure out the rest and search the rest. There's actual very good books on how to do all these things, make good decisions about buying telescopes, introduction to the sky, some of the basics of star hopping. All those type of things are in these books. So, and I said a very partial list here. Many references and YouTube videos and all those good type of things. So please make full use of those things. Uh, Let the hobby consume your reading time and all that type of stuff too. It's very fruitful. These are very instructional. Will help you out a lot. Lastly, or one of the last things is join an astronomy club. As I said before, with star parties, if you join an astronomy club, you come hear cool lectures about various things up in the sky, and go to those star parties associated with those astronomy clubs and watch people do the various things that they do. You'll learn a heck of a lot. A very good way to do it, and I find amateur astronomers to be generally just extremely supportive, helpful, and excited to share their hobby with you. So a very good social event also. I wanted to go a little bit about astrophotography and EAA. Just want to say that if you're a beginner, I would spend some time with your telescope, learning your telescope first before you try to jump immediately into EAA and astrophotography. It's a very effective way to gather light. You can gather even more light using these methods. The complexity and expense of astrophotography and EAA are at another level. You're just adding more sophisticated equipment on top of some of the equipment you've already invested in, and maybe let your knowledge go up to that point before you do it. EAA is electronically assisted astronomy, and here, maybe not tonight because we're just not, there's not a lot to see in the sky tonight, but here you are surrounded by skilled astrophotographers. Ask them questions. Mark, who I see lurking in the background, is very good with EAA, so you might even have a question with him about it. I was actually up here Wednesday this week and stopped here. This is a sharp cap, and I was looking at M102. You can see the dark lane in this, which I thought was really cool. So this is an edge-on galaxy. You can see a dark lane going right across the almost across the center of that galaxy there. So really cool that I was able to shake the dust off a little bit, because I hadn't done it all winter because I'm a wimp and I don't like the cold weather. So I shook the dust off a little bit and started with this image. I hadn't re-upped my license on this software, so I couldn't take a good capture of this image, but here it is in the program. Kind of cool. Here's the Crystal Ball Nebula. This is more EAA that I've done. This is the Whirlpool Galaxy. And as opposed to this galaxy being edge-on like M102 was, this one is face-on. We're looking down on it, in other words, instead of right at its edge. Whoa, what did I do? Here is, you use slightly different techniques with planets and stuff, but here is the moon, taken with my modest EAA setup. And here's Caroline's Rose, and you can see in this open cluster here, you can see some cool patterns that maybe make it appear rose-like when you look at it. And pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's because I'm going to switch over here to the thank you slides. And that is the finish of the main portion of my talk. And I think Kim will have me taking questions momentarily.
Yes, so thank you, Paul, for another great presentation. So we are going to be doing a question and answer session. I've been collecting those questions online and moderating our chat, which is also part of why I am night blind right now. So for the people who are here, Uh, when I call for your questions, you're going to raise your hand and just kind of wave it around so I can find you. Hazard, like I said, like he said, night avoiding the screens and the bright lights is very important for your night vision. So, before that though, we're just going to go over a couple quick housekeeping things. For the people here, we are using our headlights when we go to leave. We don't like running over people. We don't like getting run over. Let's avoid that. If you do need the restroom, we have the porta potty in the back to my left. And you're right, yes. We also have the gift shop and the museum area that you can go check out after, and I'll be behind the desk after the presentation. Normally we would have scopes open and for observing. However, it is quite moist and not great for the scopes at this current time. So we're going to get right into that cute question and answer session. And I'm going to start out with the first question we actually got online. And if you don't know the answer, Paul, one of our observers actually joined us online and did answer it later.
Okay.
So the question was, we go around the sun and our solar system rotates around the center of the galaxy. Does our galaxy rotate around something?
It certainly moves with respect to other galaxies, and remember that galaxies themselves are organized in subgroups and then groups and then mega groups. So there is structure upon structure upon structure within the galaxy, and they do gravitationally interact, so they probably do move predictably, but I don't know whether it is an orbit as similar as, say, a galactic rotation is, or the rotation, it probably is multi-body and probably bit more complex than just some sort of. So the answer is yes, at that scale they do move. I don't know whether it's considered an actual orbit or not.
So, like I said, our observer, who actually gave our talk last week, Dan Kirby, said the galaxy, as far as we know, does not orbit anything. However, it does, like Paul said, interact gravitationally with other galaxies. So, do we have a question out here? Oh. Well, luckily, my chat had, like I said, a number of questions. We were a quite talkative bunch today. The next one was, which type of telescope do you prefer?
I have both a catadioptric and a Newtonian, and I don't prefer necessarily either of them. And I'm maybe copping out like Dan copped out last week, in that it'd be tough to really say that one is better than the other, or etc. I would have to say that conceptually the Newtonian is easier to just jump right in and start using. So I would say if I had to make tied down to make a recommendation, I would say that the Newtonian is an excellent starting scope.
Jumping off of that, there's a saying that the best type of scope is the one you're going to actually take out and use. What is the scope you actually take out and use?
I actually use both of them. I tend to right now use my Newtonian for when I just want to pull the scope out really quick, set it up really fast, and take a look at one object in the sky at home, or when I am doing solar viewing, and just because it's easier to find the sun and stick my filter on the objective side of the scope in order to protect my eyes, but just faster to find the sun and that way using that scope. However, my equatorial mount and my Schmidt-Cassegrain, I prefer that many times when I'm coming up here, just because like I showed you with M102, I was able to see the dark lane in that galaxy. It's really cool to see galactic features through a telescope. And so, they have their. It depends upon what you're doing with what scope you want to use.
And on that note, my favorite is, of course, going to be the brand new telescope I bought that I can't use because it's raining. And
So
that
we can basically blame Kim for the weather we're experiencing right now.
yes, I was definitely a part of the problem at NEAF where everyone bought the new telescope, but I got an 8-inch Dob, and the reason for that is I am just starting out. I don't have much in the way of telescope time, so I wanted something that I could just basically plop in a lawn and say, "Let's go."
That's a very good point, and probably a very important consideration when you're buying your first scope.
Do I want to spend hours setting up? That is a no. It doesn't take hours once you start doing it for a while, but I'm not ready for that time investment yet. So, any questions from our live audience? I will periodically check in with you guys, but okay, you will have to raise your hand and be like, "Hey, I have a question." So the next online question. Oh gosh, sorry, I scrolled a little bit too far. Is can you use a microscope eyepiece in a telescope?
Uh, we did go. I did mention it briefly, but I need maybe I'm going to reiterate what I said. So the eyepieces themselves are mini telescopes. Basically, they have multiple lenses. They have multiple coatings on them. Uh, I don't know enough about a microscope eyepiece to tell you that you can or can't do it, but they are designed specifically to remove errors that you see that because you're focusing light. If you're using a lens, there's a prism effect. You get a color aberration. Daniel went over some of these last week. If you have other types of aberrations, a spherical aberration, if you're focusing with a mirror, and there's a bunch of other light itself is random in nature and has errors associated with it just being light. So there are multiple sources of error, and the eyepieces that you buy for astronomy use are specifically designed to help, if not eliminate, minimize those errors. So I would question whether you can just plop in any old microscope eyepiece and get a good result. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't. I'm just saying that one is designed to work with telescopes, and one is maybe not does not have the not, and if not capability isn't the right word, isn't optimized for astronomical viewing.
That being said, there are books out there on how to make your own telescope. I would not be surprised if someone decided, I have a bunch of microscope eyepieces, and then made a telescope to use microscope eyepieces. It would not shock me.
I'm sure you can do it, and it's a matter of understanding focal lengths and the image that you are projecting inside the telescope and all those type of things. And if you have that understanding and did those calculations, then more power to you.
If you like doing math for fun, that's a project you want to get into.
If you like doing that stuff, there are people who enjoy people make telescopes themselves all the time, grind their own lenses, all those type of things. If you're into doing that, please go ahead.
Another question that I actually know Dan had answered later, just in case you didn't know, is why do some of the end caps on some of the larger diameter telescopes have a smaller hole with a cap on them?
So I think maybe you're talking about the eyepiece side?
No, like
the objective side.
and I've seen this personally where my new telescope came with an end cap that you place over the tube, not the eyepiece side, the light collecting side of the telescope.
I would say that
and there's a a
Go ahead.
small hole in that cap.
Yep.
Oh, look, we have an example.
You might be stepping down the telescope, so you might be limiting for various reasons, maybe related to photography, but maybe again related to limiting some forms of error. You might be wanting to step down your telescope, similar to, and photographers would be much better to answer this question, but that's one method of customizing your view to what you want it to be when you are looking through your telescope.
And I actually apologize to the viewer who had answered it. It was not Dan. It was the user 1Z. They said the hole in the cap reduces brightness when you're looking at a very bright object, so you'll be able to get better resolution, especially for photography. So I apologize. Was not Dan. Different viewer. So the next question was, what is everyone's favorite space object?
Yeah, there are so many objects in the sky that I would say that varies very individualistic for each individual. I can tell you what my personal favorite are. I love the heck out of galaxies. There's something just spooky and awesome about how far away they are and how cool they are in the sky, oriented different directions, and how random and appreciating how massive they are and all those type of things. I just love looking at galaxies for those reasons. But the Ring Nebula is really, really cool. Some of the nebulae can be somewhat amorphous, but the ones with a better structure seem ghostly and awesome too. So I like some of the nebulae too.
Yeah, so the answers we actually got in chat included the moon, the sun, and the ISS.
So like I said, so many different objects in the sky. We have a universe full of them, countless objects. So the better thing is to go find your own rather than asking what other people look at. I mean, you be curious about what other people are looking at, but you're going to find your own favorite.
It's still fun to find out.
Oh yeah.
I see a question. Hold on. You're going to speak into the microphone.
What would you say is the farthest black hole from Earth?
The farthest black hole is probably the farthest things that we can see, right? Because at the center of most galaxies, including the ones that we are finding at the edge of our capability, likely have black holes in their center. Not every galaxy, I believe, has a black hole in its center, but most of them do. So there's a black hole central to most galaxies, and so we are finding galaxies within a few 100,000 years of the existence of galaxies. So over 13 billion years ago. So those guys are still black holes, and those are the farthest that we know about.
Were there other questions out here? All right. So our next question was coming from online and was actually regarding something in your presentation. Was that over 5,000 for the updates for the NGC IC guide? Was that over 5,000 each time or altogether for the updates?
I think I have to remember the source, but I think I wrote it specifically, and so it's 5,000 combined. So it was the 8,000 plus the 5,000 plus for the total.
And Dan also confirmed that one for you. So next question was, would you suggest the phone mounts you can get to take pictures through the eyepieces, or are they not as great as they are made out to be?
Yeah, I don't have enough knowledge of them to make a good recommendation whether they're worth it or not. I would have I'd have to say that as far as the total package goes, that you can probably buy individual specialized items and combine them intelligently and come out with a better result. So it all depends upon what you want to do, whether you want to start taking quick photographs quickly or whether you want better photographs and learn technique. I want to learn technique. I'm pretty slow at doing this. Some people have learned a lot faster than I am. I'm still setting up and taking a long time to do it and figure things out. But I'm getting there and plan on investing more into into that aspect of the hobby. And you can eventually take a calendar, magazine quality photographs if you put enough time, effort, and money into doing that with some pretty affordable equipment. But the total packages, I would have to imagine that you just don't get the same result as if you hand pick your equipment for what you want to do. That being said, I can't say that I have researched the package photographed astrophotographical packages as much as or at all, so I can't make any sort of strong recommendation in that way. So I would say refer your to say some of your astrophotography sources online, and YouTube has a more than enough information to get you started, at least where to start looking into reviews of that type of equipment. And I'd get a broad range of views and maybe some opinions from people who have quite a lot more astrophotography experience than I do.
Yeah, I think this was just someone who was like, let's stick my phone there, who's not necessarily interested in the latest, greatest National Geographic quality pictures.
Well, you don't have to necessarily be that, but like I said, in order to, I would research the heck out of them before investing in them.
Yeah, so once again, Dan had actually chimed in here, as well as someone else saying, from what he's seen, the Celestron Nexy, Nexy, has one of the better rated systems for adjusting your phone up, down, left, right to get it aligned. But it really does come down to look at the reviews. If there's a lot of reviews saying garbage, perhaps don't buy it.
And I'm glad Dan took that question, because I went off on a tangent there that had little to do with the phone, taking pictures with the phone. So thank you, Dan.
Yeah, he also says for stuff like that, might be good with doing lunar photography, taking pictures of the moon, but might not get you the best results for other objects. So, and I also see another question out here. 1 second.
Would you or would you not classify Pluto as a planet?
Yeah, I actually did some reading on this, and it's evidently I'm as Kim mentioned, I'm a member of the board here, and from a convention and meeting standpoint, the decision to make Pluto to declassify Pluto as a planet is interesting from a procedural perspective, as well as whether or not it really is a. I won't go into those details because they can get boring and long, but the decision was made at the end of the conference, and maybe could be, some people say, a little bit rushed, but I don't have knowledge about that conference to verify that, but that was a story I heard. However, you can see both aspects, and life is just not simple, and both are correct at the same time. It depends upon what's more important to you. The problem is trans-Newtonian objects, anything beyond did I say Newtonian trans-Neptune objects are quite numerous and can be quite big. So we might have hundreds of planet-type objects out beyond Neptune. And of course, that would make our solar system planet list huge and difficult to classify those objects beyond there. What's big enough to be considered a planet? What's too small to be considered a planet? And then now we're finding planets around other stars. So how do we name all of them? So it becomes a big mess, right? So we had to tighten up the planet definition quite a bit. However, at the same time, Pluto is an object that's near and dear to the hearts of everyone who learned the planets that Pluto was a planet from grade school on, right? Or even younger. We had a book that said Pluto's a planet, and we memorized the 9 planets, and that's it. So both are important, socially and from a societal point of view, and from a scientific categorization and definition point of view. They're both important. So the idea here is that Pluto is both in our hearts a planet, and both currently outside of the scientific definition of a planet. And like I said, life is complex. We are human beings, and we have to deal with complexity. And so Pluto is maybe not a satisfying answer, but Pluto is both a planet and not a planet.
Okay, so I do have another question, and it's a two-parter. But before that, I'm just going to put out a last call for our people online. If you have any last-minute questions, do get those in. Do you guys here have any last-minute questions? Right. So, like I said, that two-part question. Part 1, if you could only have one telescope, what telescope would it be and why?
I guess if I had to choose one, I would choose my Newtonian Dob, only because its versatility.
All right. Part 2 was, how angry would you be that you can only have one telescope?
You wanna being able to see, like I said, see objects using EAA, see them in better detail, and see cooler detail and closer up, and see them brighter is just too cool to pass up, which is why I'm doing trying to learn EAA now. So that's I would not be happy to go back in that. But at the same time, you want to guard a little bit against bloat on just gathering cool stuff. It is expensive, and you don't want to be laying out that money just for no particular good reason. So you want to walk a line, find a balance in between those two extremes.
You want all the cool. So what I'm hearing is you want all the cool things, but only the cool things that you can use.
Yeah, that can use and afford is, you have to modify your desires a little bit to fit your real life considerations.
All right. So it looks like we have exhausted the questions online. I want to thank everyone who has come out here and also joined us online. Once again, do check us out on our website, uacnj.org, where you'll find all the information about us and what we offer, as well as ways to contact us. You can also check us out on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We have the Twitch. We have our Discord server. Do join there. Share your astrophotography photos. I'd love to see them. I do check fairly often. And with that, everyone have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.